The morning my son married the wrong woman, I already knew what I was going to do. I had known for 6 months. The envelope sat in my bedside drawer, tucked beneath my reading glasses and a tube of hand cream, waiting like a held breath. Every night I'd reach past it to turn off my lamp, and every morning I'd remember it was still there. Patient, heavy, ready. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand where I came from before you can understand what I did. My name is Margaret, and I have been working since I was 16 years old. I grew up in Clover Hill, a small town in eastern Tennessee where the summers were brutal and the winters were polite. My father worked the line at a paper mill. My mother cleaned houses on the other side of town, the nicer side, the side where the lawns were edged and the driveways were sealed. I watched her come home with cracked hands and tired eyes, and I made myself a quiet promise I would build something. I didn't know what. I just knew I would. I married at 22. His name was Dennis, and he was funny and warm and completely unprepared for the weight of an adult life. We had our son Daniel when I was 24. 2 years later, Dennis was gone. Not dead, just gone. Packed a duffel bag on a Tuesday, said he needed to find himself, and drove west in a truck that still had Daniel's car seat in the back. He sent money for a while. Then he sent less. Then he sent nothing at all. I did not fall apart. I did not have the luxury. Daniel and I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on Fielding Street. I got a job at Mercy General as a ward clerk, learned the billing systems, cross-trained into medical records, and within 3 years, I was the department supervisor. It wasn't glamorous work. It was detailed, meticulous, invisible work, the kind that keeps a hospital running but never gets a round of applause. I was good at it. I was very good at it, actually, and I took pride in that even when no one else noticed. I raised Daniel alone. I went to every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every Saturday soccer game in fields that turned to mud when it rained. I helped with homework at the kitchen table after my own long shifts. I packed his lunches and ironed his shirts and sat with him through fevers and nightmares and the particular grief of a boy who notices around age 7 that his friends have fathers and he does not. "Where's Dad?" he asked me once, standing at the window on a Sunday. "I don't know, baby," I told him honestly, "but I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." I meant it with every cell in my body. Daniel grew into a good man. He was thoughtful and steady, the kind of person who remembers your birthday and holds the door and actually listens when you talk. He became a civil engineer. He built bridges, real ones, not the metaphorical kind, and I used to tell my coworkers about it with a pride I didn't bother hiding. That boy is made of everything I gave him, and he turned it into something worth looking at. He met Rebecca at a professional conference in Atlanta. She was a project manager, smart and organized, and she had a laugh that could fill a room. I liked her when he first brought her home. I liked her family too, or at least I thought I did. Her father's name was Gerald Whitmore. The first time I met Gerald, we shook hands at a backyard dinner at his home in Buckhead. He was the kind of man who has never once doubted his own importance. 68, silver-haired, built like someone who played football in college and still wanted you to know about it. He ran a commercial real estate development firm, Whitmore Group, with his name on 3 buildings downtown and a reputation for landing city contracts that seemed just a little too convenient, just a little too well-timed. I noticed that. The way I noticed things at the hospital, quietly, without making a fuss. He shook my hand and smiled and said, "So you're Daniel's mother. He speaks very highly of you." And then he turned away to talk to someone more interesting, and that was that. Over the next year, as the engagement came together, I saw Gerald at family dinners and holiday gatherings. He was always cordial, always slightly distracted in my direction. He had the particular talent of wealthy men for making you feel present but not significant, acknowledged but not valued. He talked about his projects, his contracts, his influence. He talked to Daniel like he was already a son-in-law he was grooming. He talked to me like I was the help. I told myself it didn't matter. My son was happy. Rebecca was kind. The wedding was going to be beautiful. And then, 8 months before the wedding, I found the report. It wasn't even intentional. I was visiting a former colleague who had moved into county administration, a woman named Loretta who I'd worked with for 15 years. We were having lunch, and she was venting about her job, the politics, the pressure, the way certain contractors seemed immune to oversight. She pushed a thick folder across the table, her own personal copy. She made clear, nothing official, and said, "I need someone outside this building to know this exists, someone I trust." I read it that afternoon sitting in my car. The Whitmore Group had, over a period of 11 years, systematically submitted falsified inspection documentation on 5 public infrastructure projects. 2 of them were parking structures. One was a pedestrian bridge. The falsifications weren't slobby. They were careful, layered, designed to pass a casual review. But a careful review, the kind Loretta's office had quietly conducted, told a different story. Materials substituted below spec. Load tests recorded that were never performed. Sign-offs from inspectors who, when quietly interviewed, said they had never visited the sites. Nobody had been hurt yet. But the word "yet" was doing a lot of work in that sentence. Loretta wasn't going public, not then. There were forces above her, she said. Complications, an election cycle, a mayor who had accepted donations. She was building a case. She needed time. She needed this to be done right, so it couldn't be buried. I sat in my car for a long time. My son was building bridges. My son cared about load tolerances and safety margins and the people who walked across the things he built. My son was about to become the son-in-law of a man who signed his name to documents he knew were false. I made a copy of that report. I put it in an envelope. I put the envelope in my bedside drawer, and I waited. I want to be honest about why I waited, because I've asked myself that question many times in the years since. Part of it was Loretta. I didn't want to disrupt her timeline, her careful work. Part of it was fear, not for myself, but the familiar fear of a woman who has spent her life being dismissed. The fear that I would speak and no one would listen, that I would raise my hand and Gerald Whitmore's lawyers would make me feel very small and very alone. But the bigger part, the part I'm least proud of, was that I didn't want to be the one who broke my son's happiness. I had watched him be happy. I had waited 31 years for him to be this happy, and I held that envelope in my hands and I thought, not yet. Not until you have to. I should have told him sooner. I know that now. I knew it then, if I'm honest. The wedding was held on a Saturday in September at a venue outside Savannah, a converted plantation house with Spanish moss in the trees and a white tent that glowed at dusk like a paper lantern. 300 guests. A string quartet. Flowers that cost more than my first car. I arrived in a navy dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion. I had my hair done that morning. I looked, my neighbor told me, absolutely lovely. I felt like a woman walking into a room where something was about to happen. Because I had received a phone call 6 days before the wedding. It was Rebecca. She called me late on a Sunday night, her voice careful and rehearsed in the way voices are when someone has been practicing what to say. She told me she knew about her father, that she had found on a USB drive in his home office 2 years ago documents that concerned her, that she hadn't known what to do with the information, that she had convinced herself it was old, resolved, taken care of. I should have told Daniel, she said. I should have told you. I sat very still on my couch. Why didn't you? I asked. There was a long silence, because I was afraid of what it would mean. I understood that. I understood it completely, because I had made the same choice. We had both loved someone and been afraid and said nothing, and here we were, 6 days before a wedding, holding the same quiet guilt between us across a phone line. I'll handle it, I told her. I promise you I will handle it, but not before your wedding day. Let me give you that. She cried. I sat with her through it. And then I made a phone call to Loretta, and Loretta made a phone call she had been ready to make for months. At the reception, Gerald Whitmore gave his toast first. He stood at the microphone in his white dinner jacket, his glass raised, his voice carrying the easy confidence of a man who has always had an audience. He talked about Rebecca growing up, her first steps, her graduation, the day she told him she was in love. He was charming, The room laughed when he was funny and went quiet when he was sentimental, and then he turned to our side at the table. "I also want to acknowledge," he said, his smile staying perfectly in place, "that Daniel was raised by a single mother." He paused, that practiced pause of a man who knows how to land a point, and I think we can all agree, given the fine young man he turned out to be, that it must have been quite the effort, considering what she had to work with. The laughter was nervous and scattered. Some people didn't laugh at all. I watched my son's face go tight. I watched Rebecca's hand close around her champagne glass. I set down my fork. I want to tell you that I rose to my feet in a flood of righteous fury, that I was magnificent and blazing. But the truth is quieter than that. I stood up slowly, the way a woman my age stands up slowly, and I straightened my dress, and I said in a voice that carried without effort, "Gerald, before this evening goes any further, I have something I'd like to share with our guests." He looked at me with the expression of a man who has never once been interrupted and doesn't understand what's happening. I had printed copies of the executive summary, not the full report. That was in other hands by now, official hands, the right hands, just the summary. 12 pages. I had placed them before dinner in the hands of the 2 journalists in attendance who covered city development for the Atlanta paper, friends of Loretta's who had been working this story for 4 months and were publishing the following Monday regardless. I also placed a copy on Gerald Whitmore's dinner plate. "That document," I said, "details 11 years of falsified safety inspections on public infrastructure projects contracted to the Whitmore Group. It includes your signature, multiple times." I looked around the room. "Several of you here tonight have worked with Gerald professionally. Several of you have trusted him. I think you deserve to know what that trust was built on." The room was completely silent. Gerald's face had gone the color of old paper. I sat back down. I picked up my fork. I said quietly to my son beside me, "I should have told you sooner. I'm sorry for that." Daniel looked at me for a long moment, then he reached over and covered my hand with his. What happened next unfolded over days, and then weeks, and then the months that followed. The story published on Monday morning. By Wednesday, the county had opened a formal investigation. By the following month, 2 of Gerald's business partners had provided their own documentation to investigators. Gerald's attorneys issued statements. Gerald issued statements. None of them made the facts go away. Daniel and Rebecca had a difficult autumn. There is no gentle word for what she had known and not said, and my son is an engineer. He takes structural integrity seriously in all its forms. But Rebecca had called me. She had tried to make it right, even if the timing was imperfect, and she loved my son genuinely. I was certain of that. They worked through it together, slowly, with a counselor and a great deal of honesty. I won't pretend it was easy for me either. Gerald's lawyers made calls. There were letters that required my own attorney. There were weeks when I wondered if I had done the right thing, or done the right thing in the right way, or done anything except blow apart a family I had been trying to join. But then I thought about Loretta, about her careful years of work, about a pedestrian bridge with falsified load tests, and the people who walked across it every day on their way to work, trusting that someone had done their job honestly. My son builds bridges. He would never have signed his name to a lie about one. He needed to know the man he was being asked to call family. Gerald Whitmore pleaded no contest to 3 counts of fraud 18 months later. He paid significant fines. He avoided prison. Money buys better lawyers than justice usually provides. But the Whitmore Group dissolved, his city contracts were voided, and his name came off the buildings. Rebecca rebuilt her relationship with her mother, who had not known and was devastated to learn. She built a careful, necessary distance from her father. She became, over time, a woman I respect deeply, one who had made a mistake under pressure, and then, when it mattered, told the truth. My son called me on a Tuesday night, about 2 years after the wedding. He was driving home from a job site. He said, "Mom, I want you to know something." "What's that?" I said. "When I was 7, I asked you where Dad was. Do you remember what you said?" I said I didn't know, but I was there and I wasn't going anywhere. "Yeah," he said. "I've been thinking about that a lot lately." About what it means when someone actually stays. He paused. You stayed, Mom. Through all of it, you stayed. I held the phone against my ear in my kitchen on Fielding Street. I never did leave Fielding Street, and I let myself cry a little, the way you cry when something you've carried for a very long time finally sets itself down. I raised my son alone. I made mistakes. I waited too long on something important, and I've made peace with that imperfection the way you have to make peace with the choices you made from fear. But I stayed. I was always there, and when the moment finally came that required everything I had, every careful year, every document I understood, every quiet skill that had never once gotten a round of applause, I was ready. Some people build their empires on the assumption that women like me aren't paying attention. We are always paying attention. We've just been waiting for the right moment.